Okay.
Hi, Danae, episode 6.
Episode 6.
We're going to wrap up our buyer series, but we want to do a deeper dive on appraisals because
Yeah,
that is definitely something that brings me anxiety at night.
for
And I think
sure.
it brings you anxiety at night.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and I don't think a lot of people, especially from the lending side, I don't think a lot of people know that like I don't have control over it. I
Mm,
like, because it's ordered through me and all that. We'll go into all of that, but like
mhm.
I have no control over it being the lender. So
Yep.
um this is our last buyer series.
Yeah.
That isn't it?
For this year.
For this year, exactly. Cool. Well, we'll go through appraisals now and we'll kind of wrap it up and
Okay.
tell everyone what's coming next um
Yeah.
afterwards. So to dive right into it, an appraisal, that is all quote handled from my side of things on the lender side of it to
Yep.
like the getting it going is.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm the one that will order the appraisal. We don't have contact with the appraisal. You, as a real estate agent, actually has more contact with the
Yep.
appraiser than I do. I order it through an appraisal management company.
Mhm.
And this appraisal management company then has a sphere of appraisers that they've reached out to or that they have a relationship with, and they'll essentially bid it out.
Mhm.
Right now, being that we're winter of 2024, these appraisers are not very busy, so we're seeing quick pickup, quick turnarounds, and very standard fees. They're typically between 750 and 800.
Okay.
During the heyday of chaos, we saw insane turn times, we saw insane prices, all that type of stuff. Because these appraisers were like, well, I'm busy,
Mhm.
I can charge whatever I want.
I paid $1,300 for the appraisal on my cabin in Leavenworth back in 2021.
So what's crazy is like that's kind of far out.
It
I mean,
is,
not
but
like
I mean,
crazy far
come
out.
on, you live in Wenatchee. Like it's a
Yeah.
30-minute drive.
I saw places in like Bothell, a
Uh-huh.
very standard single family home in Bothell for 2 grand.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So there's whole tangent I could go off of.
I know, yeah.
There needs to be so much reform in the
I know.
appraisal, but we can't control that. So
Nope.
we'll just go over how it's done.
Right.
So we order it, they bid it out. And during the heyday when it wasn't just like, okay, this everyone's looking for business. They kind of we get multiple results back. We could say, like, okay, we could get it to you 2 weeks from now for this higher cost, or you could do 3 weeks and it'll be this lower cost.
Mhm. Yeah.
And the more layers to complexity that a home has, the higher the price can be. Even now, it's just more work for the appraiser.
Yeah.
Whether it's the size of the home, size of the lot, any unique features, anything like that. We typically have that paid outside of closing by the client.
Mhm.
And that's really just to protect us. So we don't get hit with this $700 fee for a variety of different reasons of the buyers backing out.
Mhm.
Uh, so they'll pay for that on their credit card. And then once the order is accepted, that's when the appraisal will reach out to the agent.
Mhm.
Typically, we see it be the listing agent. And that's kind of where I would say you would step in, put on your listing agent hat
Yeah.
and kind of go through the process of getting it scheduled.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like side note on that, like we talked a little bit about CMAs like a couple like episodes ago. Definitely rely on your agent just to like make sure they do a CMA on a property that you're offering on. It's basically a data-driven report produced by your agent that is going to tell you whether or not there's a really good likelihood of the house appraising for the purchase price. Um, Obviously, we don't want you overpaying or underpaying for a property, so it's just really good data to have. But like for example, my listing that I just got pending, I have 3 offers that I received on the property. And when the appraiser reaches out to me, I'm going to make sure that I email them all of those offers because that's going to show them really good data points that the market is really hot and the value is supported via these multiple offers. I also do like to send them a copy of my CMA too and just say, hey, these are the MLS numbers of the sold properties I use to justify this pricing. And I haven't had a problem with appraisals on like my listings, but certainly have had a couple buyer low appraisals last year. But that's just kind of a side note on like the listing side, talking with an appraisal or
Yeah, so
appraiser.
they'll reach out to you, you'll schedule it, they'll do their
Right.
job, and you send them some stuff. I know, I don't know if you've had pushback on some of the situations, but I know some appraisers will be like, I don't want it. And they have a,
No, it's more just like they won't respond.
yeah,
Like,
I know I've heard
well,
of,
I tried.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
You did
yeah,
your,
I did my job. So,
exactly. And I think on the, we'll kind of go into the two things that essentially could go wrong. Hopefully the appraisal's done. It comes back, there's no issues with it, it's at value, and we move to closing. That's
right.
the ideal situation. That happens majority of the time.
Yep.
But there's a few things that could come up.
Mhm.
And when we get into the low appraisal, the emotional, which is like the emotional value, which is the multiple offers, is different than like the data points. But
Mhm. Yeah.
I think something easier to talk about, because the low appraisal is a big topic. One of the first things that could go wrong so the appraiser goes out,
Mhm.
inspects the property, they do their report, they send it back, it goes through a QA system through our appraisal management, they double check everything, and then they send it to us. And we look at it and we look to see that it's all good or what's wrong with it. And one of the things that could happen is it could come back subject to. So it's, yeah, as is and subject to.
Yeah.
As is means everything looks great, there's nothing of concern.
Right.
Subject to is where the issue comes in.
Mhm.
And it's a wide range. And what could be called out as a subject to kind of depends on the appraiser, depends on the loan type as well. For the most part, a conventional and a government loan, so an FHA, VA, or USDA, are very similar
Mhm.
requirements for the appraisal.
Mhm.
There's a few different nuances. The biggest thing with the the government loans compared to the conventional loan is they have to do a head and shoulder. So they have to look up into the attic and they have to go to the crawl space.
Gotcha.
So that's where a couple additional things could
Yeah.
be about. But if it's subject to, they have to be addressed.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's just been, something very minor that's already there's
Mhm.
all that needs to be patched, and that was already planning on being done.
I had one couple years ago where the deck had to be reattached a specific way because it was an FHA loan.
Yep.
So we had to like provide proof and like literally order the appraiser to go back out
Yep.
and like prove to whoever it be that it was secured properly.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, like if it's a new construction, a lot of the times we'll do an appraisal when it's essentially done, just the
Right.
pretty stuff isn't on there. So we'll have to do, an
Subject to
update.
them going out when it's finished. Yeah. Getting the
Exactly.
certificate of occupancy as well for that. That's a whole
Exactly.
different thing.
But that's
Yeah.
outside of the appraisal.
Right.
There's other times that it becomes a bigger issue. If something's called out on the roof, a lot of times if something's called out on the roof, the appraisal will say, get a roof, get a certified roof inspector to go out there and verify that there's, 5 years or more left on it. And so that's where, if it's a bigger thing, it could affect the loan, because majority of the time we can't close as a subject to, especially if it's a health and safety concern. When I have like agents or clients reach out and being like, hey, is this home financeable? I'll say, well, is there health and safety concerns on it? And really I wish I could, you know, if I'm not out there, I don't fully know. But really where that gets verified, whether there's health and safety concerns, is through the appraiser.
Got it.
If
Right.
the, you know, if the appraiser doesn't call anything out, there's no concerns, because that's how we as the bank, the underwriters and everything, learn more about the actual
Yeah.
property. So really it's pretty simple. Those just need to be rectified, and then we'll have another appraisal, or the same appraiser go out there and do a reinspection.
Right. And more often than not, like if I'm representing a buyer, the appraisal comes back, it's subject to, the listing team wants to sell the property. Obviously, the seller wants to sell the property. So more often than not, they're going to fix those items. Because they can't, like, if they were to just say no, they'd go back on the market, probably come across the same exact issue with another buyer. So very common for them to be like, oh yeah, we'll take care of that.
Yeah. And I mean, that's also times I've seen people have something called out in the appraiser and in the appraisal, and maybe get some additional seller credit or something like that. So there's some negotiating with that as well.
Yep, totally.
You know, I think, like you said, most of the time it gets taken care of. Very rarely has it been a really big issue.
And it might just be that the sellers don't have any funds.
Yeah.
To address anything. That usually is where it's like, okay, it's a hard roadblock because of that.
Yep. And the sellers have to relist and cash offer only. Or, you know, they have to relist as a renovation loan and stuff like that. So those more pinpointed programs like a renovation loan have a completely different you know, requirements for the appraisal.
Yep.
I think the bigger issue that tends to come up is low appraisals. You know, you really talked about the appraisal contingency, or touched on the appraisal contingency and how that's really there. And so if we get the appraisal back, it comes in low. Can you kind of touch on the contingency side of it and how that comes into play at that point?
Yeah, so I have only ever had 2 low appraisals come back. They were both last year. One of them, my first one was with you.
Yes.
And basically the scenario was, the appraisal came back and it was like, what was it, $50,000 low? It was ridiculous.
It was ridiculous. And we actually, like, we did a whole switch on that one too.
Correct.
An appraisal that actually came in value, because that was so.
So the problem with that particular, and God bless appraisers, okay? Like, you know, it's a great career, like it's awesome. I don't understand how an appraiser from Michigan can pick up the appraisal and then have someone else go out, do the property inspection, and then they somehow use our MLS data and create a report that is just wildly not accurate. That's what happened.
That little tidbit right there is one of the main reasons why I keep majority of my loans in my bank, because my bank does not do that. We use local appraisal, but this was a broker that did it differently. And I had done a handful with them and I hadn't had an issue, and then I found out that they do some other appraisals this way, and
never again.
They're a very different market out
there. So basically I like Danae let me know, hey, like it's low appraisal. She sent me a copy of the report. Contractually, we have 3 business days to alert the listing side that, hey, there was a low appraisal. Now I am combing through that report and trying to figure out, okay, where, like, what comps did they use? Is this even accurate? Come to find out, this appraiser, again, God bless them, I don't want to harp on appraisers, but this was crazy. Used a comp that was like 5 miles away. Used a comp that sold a year ago. And then blatantly missed 3 comps that had sold in the exact neighborhood within the last 3 months. Like, it was just mind-blowing. And so
appraisers are required to use only sold properties.
Right.
They can't be listed or pending. So fully sold properties. and within a certain mile or a certain mile radius and a certain time frame. If they can't find anything within that, and obviously this wasn't the case on that one, if they can't find anything in those requirements, they can expand out a little bit.
Right.
But
This
yeah,
was just wildly inaccurate.
this one was
I mean,
inaccurate. That's more of telling everyone else that there are specific requirements. They can't just be like, oh, let's see what's around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so I mean, typically they're going within a 2-mile radius, properties that have sold in the last 6 months. I have seen it where they will go back a year, just so that they can get more data points that are closer to the subject property.
If
But
you have a
basically,
unique property that's hard to find
right.
a similar setup or anything like that, that's when we
Mhm.
it needing to be expanded.
Yeah, so I'm looking through the report, and basically what I do is I will put together like a rebuttal email of like, hey, you selected this comp. Here's why this isn't the best comp to select. And I'll go through their entire list. I will then produce a list that I think is better, and here's why. Here are the adjustments that I would have made. And then you guys, I will give that to you, the lending team, and then you'll do what's called a reconsideration of value. And unfortunately, they said go kick rocks.
Which
But
I have a few notes. I have a few notes on that. This one again was with a broker.
right.
It's during a reconsideration of value, it's very difficult to get the appraiser to adjust and you're essentially telling someone that their opinion's wrong. No one likes being told that.
I don't. Yeah.
In addition to it, they get a slap on their wrist for like, and on their license that something was adjusted.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep. So even more so, they don't want that.
Really?
In addition to like your rebuttal that you send to me, when I'll do it whether it's a broker or not, but when it's in-house, when it's with my bank, I have a whole appraisal management department or appraisal department that are all licensed appraisers. They're in different areas because we don't have, one in each state because that wouldn't make sense. But they'll go through and they'll comb through as well. And they'll take everything you sent and create, and put that together with their reconsideration rebuttal as well. And there's also been times that I have had an appraisal come in low and all upper management of the appraisal department review it. And they're like, this is a bad appraisal. And they'll authorize us to order another appraisal.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So that's, if it's blatant, if it's not just like, oh, this is a low appraisal, and they can't, and they can justify like, oh, like that comp kind of made sense or, something like that. If it's a clear, like this is a bad, they weren't working in the best faith of the like buyer and sellers.
Right.
There's been one time that I've had that happen in that, but it is a possibility.
Yeah, so kind of going back to like, so the other low appraisal that I had was last November. And we actually submitted the reconsideration of value and they completely changed their appraisal. So that was a huge win, and the appraisal actually came back $15,000 higher.
Oh, higher purchase price? Oh, geez. Nice. Yeah.
That was awesome. So it can work.
Rewinding a bit,
Yep.
when a low appraisal comes in, we have a few options. Or a few steps, I should say. One, we will always go through and do this reconsideration of value.
Yeah. Well, let's back up because like contractually, like, so there's contractual things on like our side for agents. So one, we do have to notify the selling side that the appraisal came back low. Then the seller has the ability to pay for a new appraisal, request that you guys do a reconsideration of value, which we already start that process anyway. They could just automatically reduce the purchase price to the appraised price. Or 4, they could say, go kick rocks. You're going to buy it at the purchase price. Yep. Buyer then has 3 days to respond to that and go, yep, I'm working on the reconsideration of value, or I'm getting a new appraisal done. They can say, I will come up with maybe a little bit of a difference between appraised price and purchase price. Or if the seller was like, no, you're going to buy it for the purchase price, buyer could say, sorry, I'm going to walk away. I'm not going to pay for overpay for your property. So there is a lot of power that buyers have.
As
And
long as that contingency is there.
is correct. Now, in a competitive scenario, you don't have that finance contingency. So that built-in appraisal contingency protecting you, you are automatically agreeing to pay the difference between the appraised price and the purchase price. So that's on top of your down payment. And that's where that CMA that your agent runs is so critical so that you can assess that risk and whether or not that's worth it to you to potentially lose that money. But then if you can't afford the difference between purchase price and appraised price, you're going to walk away, breach the contract, and lose your earnest money. Do you want to do that?
Yeah. So in the situation that the seller is like, I'm not adjusting the purchase price. From my side of things, there's a few different things that can happen. If let's just say the purchase price was $500,000.
Okay.
And the buyers are putting 20% down.
Okay.
That means they have a $400,000 loan amount. The
Mhm.
appraisal comes in at 475.
Okay, 25K short.
Because this situation, they have a few different ways. Because they have more than 3% down,
Mhm.
they don't have to bring in more.
Mhm.
They could just add mortgage insurance onto their
Mhm.
onto their monthly payment.
So
And
reallocate that down payment, part of it, towards the appraisal difference.
essentially, yes. So it's
Okay.
just that the purchase price would stay the same. The loan amount would stay at 400,000, but your loan
Yeah.
to value ratio
Yeah.
would be the 475 compared to the 400. So your loan to value ratio will be higher and therefore needing insurance.
Makes sense.
So monthly payment would go up, but cash to close would essentially stay the same.
Got it.
The only reason why monthly payment would go up because you have to throw on mortgage insurance.
Yeah.
If someone's putting minimum down, I'm just gonna go with 5% just for it kind of covers all bases. There's certain scenarios that you can do 3% on a conventional loan.
Yeah.
But at 5%, if they were, let's go with the same $500,000 purchase price minus 5%, that'd be $25,000 down, they'd be at a 475 loan amount. If I'm gonna use a slightly smaller low appraisal. If the appraisal came in at 475, this can get a little bit complicated how this is all calculated, but we have to then create 5% down or 95 loan to value ratio based off of the appraised value.
Yep.
So we would have to, if it came in $5,000 low, we'd have to go 495 minus 5%.
Right.
So our loan amount would be 472.50.
Got it. Yep.
And so then we would take our $500,000 purchase price minus the 472.50, and our down payment would be 29,750.
Got it.
So it's pretty close to the $5,000 difference,
Right.
but it's not the full $5,000 difference. It's
Okay,
essentially
that's good to know.
5%. You know, when you're talking $5,000,
It's affecting your loan to value. That's what the appraisal is doing.
exactly.
Yeah,
So it's essentially 5%, assuming the lowest down payment,
right.
percent of the difference.
Makes sense.
You know, on the original situation, if you wanted to stick out 20% down, you know, it wouldn't be a full $25,000. You'd have to bring in the difference. It would be lower than
Sure. Sure.
So, you know, we'd kind of go through all those options to see what made the most sense. If someone was cash flush, I'd say bring in the difference, keep your monthly payment, you know, your monthly payment would go down at that point. If cash is tighter and they're like, we don't really have anything to bring in, but monthly payment is a little bit more flexible. That's a great option to kind of get around it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, overall, appraisals typically come back at the purchase price. the majority of the time. So like, please hear us when we say that. Like,
Yeah.
it's very much
I
in
think
my.
the one time period that I see them come in low more often.
Mhm.
And one of the main reasons why I bring this up is because I think we could be getting to that point
Yeah.
sometime this year.
Shifting market.
Shifting market. So
Yep.
as home prices start to increase,
Mm-hmm.
we start seeing them come in low because there's this transition period of, this data point
Right.
compared to 6 months later, in that 6 months, they were all lower. And then it can switch like that of
Right.
them increasing, and they're going off of the 6 months later time point, and
Mhm.
the data is not there.
The data lags. And like, again, like Danae said, appraisers can only go off of sold data points. So even though there's multiple offers in the last 30 days, that isn't necessarily going to correlate onto the multiple listing service as sold data until those pending homes are actually sold.
Yeah.
So,
And that's really, that's the emotional value.
right, right.
There's, I had a handful of people kind of in the last big that transition period that paid more,
Mm-hmm.
and it paid off. Their
Right.
home prices went up. So it's, you really want to, this is something I know that you'll sit down with the clients before they make an offer and say, okay, here's my CMA. Here's
Right.
what I would be shocked if it appraises for this
Mhm.
one. Do you
Yep.
still want to go?
Yep.
Okay, yes. Then Danae, okay, if we think it's gonna come in here, here's what the loan structure could
Right.
look like. And you as a client would then have to make the decision on if it's worth it or not. There's times that it is, and there's times that it's not.
Mhm.
Just being well informed on those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's definitely not our decision whether or not you choose to go forward with a home that may be appraised low. Like there could be a variety of things where you're like, this is my dream home. I don't care. Like I'm happy to overpay for it temporarily because I know I'm going to be here long term. And then I know the long-term investment, it's going to pay off. But there are other scenarios where like if you're cash strapped, it probably doesn't make sense for you to come up with a difference. But the majority of the time, like we are able to either get a reconsideration of value, which I was successful on that one last year, or like we got a new loan going, saved it. That appraisal actually came back higher than the purchase price, which is awesome. So there's ways that we can like work to make this benefit you as the buyer. But ultimately, if you've got that appraisal contingency, you're protected and your earnest money is covered. So that is like the ultimate protection that will cover you so that if it does come back low, you can walk away if we're unable to work with the seller to get that purchase price lowered for you.
Um, cool. Well, there's a ton of things
Yeah.
I can run into. So, listeners, if you have questions, let us know.
Yeah.
There's so many like specifics that are impactful to
Oh
it.
yeah. Yeah, for sure.
That kind of wraps up our buyers segment.
Yeah.
I think we're planning on doing a market update next week. There's definitely
Yep.
been a lot that has gone on.
Mhm.
And then we're going to kind of dive into our seller series.
Yeah. So we'll transition into like how to sell a house. One thing that Danae and I were kind of talking
Selling,
about. Oh, good.
if you're selling and buying, kind of
Yeah.
my side of that.
Yep.
I can be going all the ins and outs of all that.
Yes, definitely. And then Danae and I were kind of talking about we might do a little sneaky bonus episode on selling to buy. So keep your ears perked for that. And then we're really looking forward to the second series on selling. So thanks for listening.
All right. Thanks. Talk later, Marita.
All right. Bye.